Good evening and welcome to our Learning in Leadership webinar series. This is an educational technology strand, and our topic this evening is how can you differentiate learning opportunities using technology? And we're going to take a look at this and from a couple different viewpoints. So as you think about differentiating learning opportunities, we're going to look at it through the learning styles. So knowing your students who really want to have auditory, kinesthetic, visual learning experiences, and that they know which way they learn best. We also are going to look at it through the lens of how we can offer a variety of content topics and choice in those different content and research topics, how we can look at the process and varying different ways that we learn, the process that we learn. So we're going to take a look at that this evening. And finally, the products, how we can vary the opportunities. And technology lets us do all of these really well and makes it more efficient and a lot of times more productive for both the students, the learners, as well as the teacher to differentiate and to manage students that are at different places in their learning process. So, we're going to connect this conversation tonight to our district strategic plan. And when we look at offering a world class education, we really are thinking about how we can offer personalized pathways for all our learners. We really want to ensure that all learners are successful, that they meet and exceed the Colorado academic standards, and that we do that with a 21st century skills communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. So, as you're thinking about how we can differentiate learning opportunities, on the side chat, I linked for us a really good article about differentiating learning with technology. So, you can have that as an additional resource. And when we're finished with this topic, you might want to take a deeper dive and look at some other resources that support differentiating learning. We've backward planned our learning experience this evening, and we're going to start with with enduring understanding of perspective influences interpretation. So when we look at learners, and we know that they have different points of understanding and times when things are a little more frustrating and times when things come really easy for them. So we want to make sure that that perspective of where they're struggling, where they need to be challenged and advanced at a different rate, and when they're right on the path they need to be, right in that zone of proximal development. So we're going to take a look at this and think about how the perspective, if I'm struggling, if I'm needing to be more challenged, if I'm just at that right place, really it influences my interpretation or a learner's understanding, their depth of understanding. So when we're looking at differentiation, we're really looking to meet the needs of all our students. And we can have a classroom of 30 students in a fourth grade classroom, and you'll have some students that are struggling and perhaps are reading at a first grade level. And you might have students, I've taught fourth grade and had some students, a few that were reading at a high school level. So you have this wide range of abilities, and meeting those needs is a challenge. So, how we design our classroom environment to provide a safe, encouraging, positive learning environment for all the students is really important. So, one of the things we need is some really good diagnostic tools. We need to be able to acknowledge the readiness levels of our students. So, starting with some type of a diagnostic test or assessment before we begin can help a teacher to really plan the differentiation that's going to need to happen in the classroom. And I think that creating that classroom environment with shared partnerships, with the learners taking ownership, it's their agency that they are driving their learning. One of the ways we use technology to help us with this classroom environment is often to create a virtual environment in conjunction with the face to face classroom. So some teachers are creating e-portfolios with their students, and they might be doing this in a Google site, a wiki. They might have a learning space in a social learning environment for small group discussions and maybe something like a Edmodo, or another learning environment might be a Schoology or a Moodle environment. So we're going to take a look at some of that blended learning to help our students with their classroom environment. So they have opportunities. It's a way that a teacher can also provide some modules or small chunks of learning at different rates, provide additional resources for students who need to go back and perhaps listen to a video or a podcast about the content, or those who need to be challenged and accelerated. We really want to provide that high quality curriculum. And in Douglas County, we've been developing our guaranteed and viable curriculum. And we're saying that the Colorado academic standards are the floor, and everything we're going to do with higher order thinking and rigor, as well as relevance to real world learning experiences, is going to increase the quality of the curriculum and provide a really engaging learning opportunity for all of our students. So again, that assessment piece, I want to make sure that we think about having diagnostic assessments at the beginning to help us to use that information, to use inventories from our students about their learning styles, and then to create those flexible groupings within our learning opportunities to provide a differentiated experience for all students. So we really want to know about the perspective. Where's the learner coming from with a unit of study? And to be really flexible, that we're going to use the word on ramps and off ramps. So as students gain the knowledge that they need, the skills that they need, the content that they need to understand, and they have a depth of understanding, we can get them back into the group if they were struggling with something. We want those on ramps and off ramps so that we can keep the students moving at the pace they need to, and we can meet all their learning needs. So we're going to start with this essential question. Why is it important to have a variety of learning opportunities or differentiation to support all learners? And I think it goes to this idea that our learners come with many different learning needs, and it might be that they have a certain environmental need, and that stimuli, there's different things we can do to support their type of a learning environment. It might be with the lighting. Some teachers have added lamps in their classroom to create just nooks of learning areas. There might have some emotional needs, and there's ways that we can use technology to help us with keeping our students clearly seeing their motivation, their personal responsibility, their task performance, and providing some structure. Technology really plays a role in this. And in fact, in the environment, having what we said before, that balance of a really rich, supportive physical classroom, but also having those virtual learning spaces to supplement and to pace students so that they can be working on projects of their interest and that meet their learning styles the best. So we want to have a social is a really important thing. And as we look at the 21st century skills, we more than ever see that there's connectivism, that students are learning in the digital age with this idea that they connect with others, that they share ideas, that they problem solve, they make decisions, they work together and come up with innovative solutions to solving some of the world's problems or the challenges that they are addressing, and having social learning opportunities. So in the classroom, it might be pairing up with another student, but online, it might be that they're working with an expert. They might be interviewing a doctor, perhaps a banker, someone in a financial field. They might be contacting a politician to learn more about our history and what's happening in our government today. So having these opportunities for our students to connect face to face, learning the good eye contact and social skills of communication, but also learning how to navigate the online world and to develop a digital citizenship and how to work with other peers in an online environment as well. It can be students that are outside of class, someone in another state, another country, and giving our students these opportunities to socialize and to have that be part of how we differentiate their learning experience can really impact the physical as well as the psychological learning experience. So sometimes when a student has, and we have some impulsive or analytical or some different needs that may not be addressed by one teacher with 30 students, having an opportunity to have that online environment might be a balance that really supports that learning style. So when we're looking at this, our outcomes for all of us tonight, the participants will differentiate learning opportunities with technology. So as you're looking at your backwards plan template, it'll be in stage 3 when you're designing your learning activities and you have a progression of learning activities to offer students, and you want to have that opportunity to differentiate. That's where we put the technology. So you're going to create your backwards plan with your enduring understandings, your essential questions, your outcomes, looking at the big ideas of the learning. You're going to want to take a look at the right assessments and have a balance of your formative, your interim, and your summative assessments. And it might be that technology is part of that. Sometimes it's appropriate to have a summative project where your students have an opportunity to create or construct their own learning and their knowledge, and the way that they want to share that could be using technology to express what they know and understand. And their depth of knowledge will come through perhaps if they've created a video or a podcast or some other creative way of expressing what they know and understand. Um, that technology might be a place where you have something with an assessment, and it might be a performance task. That's an example where you might put it. And then as you're planning out those learning activities, we're going to take a look at some different ways that we can use technology to support the learning. We're wondering, how does technology support visual, auditory, kinesthetic learning styles? And I'm going to use the word original here. And I think that if we can stay focused, that our students aren't going out to Google to search for images, that our students are creating their own visual representation of what they know and understand. They might be creating a graph, a diagram, they might be illustrating, they might be creating the process of the Krebs cycle or the life cycle of an animal or a plant cycle, life cycle. So having those original images is another piece of evidence of what our children understand and what they know. Their scripts need to be original. That's where they're synthesizing the information that they've been doing their research, and they've been participating in class discussions. They might be doing some primary source interviews. And from all of this knowledge, they're going to create a script that synthesizes into the big ideas what they know and understand. And then it's a chance to tell a story or to create a public service announcement or to share it in an oral way. And they can share it with the visuals, with their script, with their story that they're telling or their information they're presenting. They might be doing the art of argument and having a debate with someone else about the topic that they've been learning about. And so we want to give them a chance to orally express as well as writing. So we're going to look at different opportunities. And two things that we have here are VoiceThread and Show Me. And now the Show Me is an app for the iPad. There's another one called EduCreation. And I'm going to put those in our side chat. So we're going to get started here with VoiceThread. And VoiceThread, I'm going to take you to some websites. You can see some examples of what students and teachers are creating to support the learners. So VoiceThread, just to give you a little, allows you to share a presentation, an image, and others can give you feedback or connect with what you've created. And you can do it in 3 ways. You can actually write on the person's presentation with disappearing ink. You can text a response or ask a question or make a connection to the presentation. And thirdly, and most engaging, is when we hear people use their recorders, their mics, and they record a connection or maybe ask a question, something that their information is making them ponder further. So people can give you feedback, extend your thinking, and ask questions. So that one's going to be VoiceThread. And then the app on an iPad, there's 2 of them, and I'm going to the one is called Show Me. It also has a website full of examples. So actually you can make it on your iPad app and then it sends it directly to the website. And so it becomes a collection of all these incredible videos of students and teachers or adults sharing how they understand a process, the steps to solving perhaps a math problem, the problem solving steps that they've gone through. You can do something with a diagram and explaining your thinking. It might be of the water cycle, and you explain the pieces of it. So we're going to take a look at some examples of that. And the other one is called Educreation. So those are two apps that you can create your own images. You can record your voice, and it creates a movie of it. So we're going to put those in there. And I'm going to do one more slide, and then I'll take you out to some of these sites so we can take a look at them. So another way we can support our visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners is with creating a book, online book, that allows you to add music to it. It allows you to add your own voice and record it. It allows you to add your own original story or a body of information that you've collected or created to share with others. And if you're, in addition to those, which include images, you can put your own original images in there. Students also are finding that it's really easy to use Podomatic, and it allows you to do a podcast and to put images with that one. And the other one is called Yodio. So we've got 5 different resources we want to take a look at. Mixbook is also really easy to share. You get an embed code. I think what teachers have done is create one teacher account, and then the students log in and save their book with their name and the title of the story. So Mixbook is an online Web 2.0 tool. It is free. Well, actually, all of these are free. So Yodio is a good one, and it allows you to make a podcast, and you can use your computer. You can use a cell phone or a smartphone. Let's see, what else could you use? Smartphone. And I think the other one is Podomatic. Allows you to create podcasts with images. And it stores it for free as well, and it gives it an easy way to share with a hyperlink or the embed code. So we're going to take a look at each of these. I'm going to stop sharing the presentation. I'm going to take you out to the internet so we can look at some of these samples. And I'm having a compatibility problem that's not allowing me to share. So sometimes with browsers, and I had to add a Flash update on my computer, and I know what's happening is it's not doing a separate window for the Adobe tonight. So I'm just going to continue with our presentation, and I'll be sure to give you links to some of these different resources so you can take a look at them. In VoiceThread, there's one that I'd love for you to take a look at. So I'm going to give you the exact link to it. It's one that some students created. Let me get you back on the presentation here quickly. And it's a combination of original artwork. The students were studying plants in science. They were in their literature, different writing styles of poetry, and they recorded their voices and reflect about their learning process. So the one I was going to share with you is, I think, a 2nd or a 3rd grade example. And I'm going to get you the link for that one. You can take a look. But there are so many examples in VoiceThread. And I think the other thing that's really helpful is they give you a lot of almost unit or lesson ideas of how you can use VoiceThread.
Weather. Art and Poetry by students in Mrs. Matson's 3rd grade class, May 2008.
And so I'm going to let you just hear the first student is going to read her poem.
Snow falls down gently. The skater glides peacefully. Colors fill the sky. Hi, my name is Olympi. I am 8.5 years old. I chose this haiku because I like the painting. It makes me want to go out skating. I also love the colors in the sky. It was fun to write a haiku because it was a challenge to make the syllables fit. I love the way it turned out.
And
Hi, Olympi. I love your colors also in your picture. The words are beautiful as the colors are. I particularly like the way that you have drawn some shadows on the snow. That's something very daring for children. I think this is just a super way to present art and poetry. Good job.
so you got to hear a little bit of the voice thread where the student was reflecting, shared their poem, reflected about why they chose haiku, what they liked about that style of writing. And then that student has about 20 other either text messages from reflections of people looking at the poem and or the audio, and you could hear it sounded like an adult giving some feedback to the student. Olympi was her name. So that's an example of it. Let's see. All right. So one of the other ways we can do this is by creating original videos. And there's lots of examples of how we could use an online tool called One True Media. It has it allows you to create your movie online. You can put in images, music in the background. You can record your voice. You can put the movie inside of it with a really easy way to share it to YouTube, which allows you then to create a teacher's playlist, and the students can have a safe place, a link to your playlist, and then student projects can be displayed in YouTube and then possibly shared with other classrooms. But the teacher can be the moderator of that and give the link to those who you want to share it with, maybe the parents or grandparents who can also take a look at the students' videos that are created. A really easy way to create it on our computers and on a Mac is to use Photo Booth. And when you select to have a movie, you can put a background in there. So you could take an original image, say the students were doing a report about Colorado, and they could have their map of Colorado in the background, and then it acts like a green screen, and the student's face can be in front and describing different aspects of living in Colorado. So it might be about some of the plant life here and how different animals are endangered and what we can do about helping our endangered animals to survive. So taking a look at ecosystems around Colorado and the impact of humans on our environment. That's another example. So we could have this really rich video presentation, and it's really easy to create it in Photo Booth. When they stop the video, you just drag and drop the video to your desktop, and then you can upload that into your Google Docs, and it's ready to be embedded in a website and or link to a Google presentation if you're doing something there, or you could use your video and just share it as the product of what you've been learning about. iMovie is another product that is easy to create videos in, and it also allows you to do the green screen and add your own background and then have the student narrating the story and be a part of it. We also have in the district a subscription to Discovery Streaming. If you need your login or any help with that each teacher is given a passcode for their school to create their login. And if you're not sure if you have one or not, let me know and I can help you find it. And then you can take some of the editable video clips. So you might have a little bit of background, say from Martin Luther King's speech, I Have a Dream. And that little bit of video could play, and then the student stops it and then makes connections to it. So what's happened in history since Martin Luther King made that video, and what things are happening in the world about civil rights. So that video could become a part of a larger project. And sometimes we call this a mashup mashup, when we start to add our own images, our own script, maybe some video from, say, the Discovery Streaming editable videos, all of a sudden we're putting these pieces together and creating our own story about what we know and understand. And that depth of knowledge is being shared in a product. So what we're looking for are different performance tasks that don't have to be measured just by having a test. So we're looking for ways that our students can share what they know and understand, and they can do it with an oral report, something that they share, that they explain their thinking. They can create their own images, their original diagrams and data, and explaining from maps and using other technology tools like, say, Google Earth, and narrating it as they're sharing that information. And then the kinesthetic, how can they interact and create something and share it and show their thinking. And we're going to talk about that kinesthetic in just a second with some different examples. So in here, kinesthetic is when you get to have your hands on. So if you're doing that science experiment, I think of this as having 3 students on a team. Students A and B are doing a think aloud. Maybe they're doing their inquiry, or they're explaining the scientific method, or they're sharing how they solve a math problem. And they have, in the case of the students here with their science experiment, they're going to be talking through the experiment, explaining what their hypothesis is. They're going to share the steps that they went to solve it, what amounts they use of different solutions, how the solutions interact together, and then what did they find out? What data did they collect? What observations did they make? And so having that on video gives it a chance to go back with a rubric and say, how well did you express what you know and understand about your scientific method? And share your inquiry, your questions, your ponderings. And you could do that with math. So instead of having the science materials out, you would have math manipulatives. 2 students are doing their math problem solving. They're starting with what they know and understand. They're thinking about what strategies they can use to solve the problem. They're thinking about how they will use the manipulatives to help them with the solving of it, and they're doing some collaboration in the thinking together. Student C is the person who has the computer or an iPad or a smartphone or some device, maybe a digital video camera, and is the one recording. And then we rotate, and we have 2 other students get to be the ones presenting, and the other student is the one videotaping. And if the class can decide on a rubric with the teacher about what is acceptable evidence of their understanding of the scientific method or solving math problems, they can use that rubric to look back and say, how well did we express what we know and understand about solving these problems? Were we correct, and how do we know that? Do others disagree with us? And if so, we have to go back and look at what are some of the possible ways to solve this, and get some divergent thinking, and get a chance to practice that art of discussion and argument even. So giving those opportunities to students to really do some deep thinking about their learning, about the process they go through, about their understanding of the content, and how they're expressing what they know and understand in different ways. Reader's Theater is another example where we can get a lot of diagnostic information about our students' fluency and comprehension. It gives the students an opportunity to perform and to practice repeatedly a piece of text. So it might be a play or a story that the students could adapt and create an original script, talking about some of the main events from it, and create even their own original script about a story. They might make a text innovation where they take the structure of, say, a fairy tale, but they make it into their own, or they might make it into a fractured fairy tale and then present that. And having that videotaped also gives us another opportunity to share it with an authentic audience beyond turning something into just the teacher. So a lot of times these products that we're creating are shared on that e-portfolio or the class website, or we were talking about a YouTube playlist that the teacher creates and then adds the different videos to then be shared with an audience of parents, another class. The teacher might be putting those videos inside of an Edmodo learning group, and the teacher would create the group and then maybe invite another classroom from around Colorado or around Douglas County or maybe in another state or another country to give authentic feedback to our students. They might share their videos with an author and ask for some constructive feedback about how well they did constructing their script, their story, their information, and get some authentic feedback from some other experts. So having these videos of students solving math problems and then inviting a banker, or might be a parent in the classroom or in the school who's willing to take a look at the video and give some feedback, and then the students can then improve and continue that learning process. So we're looking at different ways technology can really support that with video, podcasts, and different sites. So what are some differentiated blended learning opportunities? And when we look at blended learning, InnoSight gives us a framework for how we're working with the brick and mortar with our classroom environments. And we could have technology-rich instruction happening in the classroom, but everything stays within still the teacher and the students in the classroom. So that's one way we can look at it. When we move into online, it means that a teacher could create some learning opportunities that are pre-created, and or a student could design, say, a project-based learning opportunity. They could be sharing a video that explains what they know and understand and how they solve problems, and they could create a class collection of how-to videos that explain and that other students could watch and use to support them if they're struggling with a concept. That was a model that some of you may have heard of with flipped classrooms. And then Khan Academy has created almost a library bank of videos that support a lot of the math and the sciences. But we're seeing that become adapted where teachers are creating their own. And when students are asked if they've used Khan Academy or their teachers, often they really appreciate the teacher version because it supports the way the teacher may have presented the information or have framed the conversation and the content. So having that same idea of a library of videos to go back to if you're struggling, or to add student created videos that help. It might be an enrichment or a challenge for a student to explain something that's more advanced, and others then who are ready to go and move ahead can hear it from student language as well. And that becomes another formative assessment for us, how you explain what you know and understand. So having some of these online learning environments offer those opportunities for our students who need off-ramps when they're struggling with something or when they need to be accelerated, and then how to come back into the main the outcomes that the teacher is striving for, so that they can have that blend of really rich teacher instruction with individualized, personalized learning pathways. So I think technology really supports us with creating those virtual online learning spaces. And you might be using Google Sites, you might be creating this inside of a learning management system. In Douglas County, we have many teachers creating their online learning in something called Moodle. Some of our Center for Professional Development courses are created in Moodle. Actually, what we're doing tonight is another example of blended learning, and we're using Adobe Connect for this. In Douglas County, we have the Google for Education, and as part of that suite of applications, you may want to connect with Google+, and there's something called a Google Hangout that works a lot like this. You can share a presentation. It could be a Google presentation you've created. You can share Google Docs. There's a place for the side chat inside of the Google Hangout. The one thing, you can have up to 10, I think 9 people in the room that can be talking at the same time. You could have more people, but not everyone would be able to use their mic in a Google Hangout. So, and the other thing, limitation is you weren't able to record a Hangout. I think that may just be changing. So we're going to look for an update on Google Hangouts. And it sounds funny, but if you're interested in learning how to do something like any of the Google apps, you actually Google it, and Google has the most incredible resources for helping you learn how to do something in Google, whether you're wondering about a Google presentation, how to share things in a Google Doc, how to use the research tools embedded inside of a Google Doc to make research and citing our sources easier. So there's just a lot of features in all of the Google apps that we have access to. And I was going to say that in addition to the Google Hangout, which I was saying is 9 people can be in there and have their mics on, but there's something called Google Hangout On Air. And with On Air, you can have limitless, or I think it's hundreds, if not even possibly thousands, could attend your on air presentation, and it can be recorded. It'll automatically send your recorded presentation into YouTube. So then you can get that link and or embed code, and you could share that on your site. Let's see. So again, part of the blended learning is that you now have these modules or differentiated learning opportunities created, and it might be that you've created some constructivist learning opportunity that's from like project-based learning. And what I like to think about when I go and look at project-based learning or challenge-based learning is I think about, are there already pre-made units that I can adopt? I could take them as they are and join them, or take them and put them into my online learning space for students that are looking for a challenge. And again, this is a different process. It's really guided. It gives structure to the learning, but it really empowers our learners to be the ones to ask the questions, to create their project management, how they're going to find the information, if they're going to be interviewing with primary sources, what type of maybe a simulation they're going to create, or how they're going to show what they know and understand with a type of product. So often they are being asked to look at really big ideas or big challenges. Some examples would be about safe water or our food supplies, looking at air and land resources. Sustainability is a big issue that students can do some research with. Resiliency in the face of natural disasters is another example. So having this become a rotation model, and that you can now be working with small groups or individualized instruction, and then you've created these online learning opportunities that are there for our students to do some more self-directed learning. So that really creates a flex model, that we have different ways of getting our students to the materials and the pacing that they need. If they need something refresher, and for some students, they just need to hear that the way that you presented how to solve something, or the challenges you gave, or the way that you asked questions, and they need to hear it over and over again as they are solving perhaps a math problem. And it might be that the way that you've given your instruction prompts them to look for some resources to help them in their thinking, or to go back to a previous step and then see how it builds to their next level of thinking. So how you scaffold that gradual release of learning. Having those videos already created that students can go back to and or use as a challenge to move them on to the next step can be really helpful. The self-blend model that our students have, I think that fits with our project-based learning really well, and the enriched virtual model. So we have some opportunities in online learning that get us some really nice differentiated learning opportunities. So at this point, it is time for questions. And so as you ponder this, if you think of things that you aren't sure about, that you're not sure how to get to the Yodio, or how to contribute inside a VoiceThread, or how to use some of the other, we talked about the One True Media. I'm going to add that one to our list for videos. If you have any issues with this, you may email me at Kim McMonigle. I'm Director of Ed Tech in Douglas County School District, and I am happy to help you and share with you some steps. Often there are YouTube videos created about these different tools. So you might go into YouTube and search for One True Media, and there's actually a video about how to use that site. So it's a how-to video. So one of the things that I think is really important is that we as educators don't put additional pressure on ourselves to know all of this technology, but to know where to solve it and to help our students to think about where they can find the answers. Often the sites like in VoiceThread have an online tutorial. So you can watch it and you can see the steps for how you submit or share a presentation, and then how you add your voice to it, how you can add the text if you want to have some text inside some, you might be asking some questions. So the ways to use this technology, often there are online resources that help us. And joining some type of a social learning network for you as an educator. I belong to some Twitter feeds, and I purposely look for, in fact, there are groups of educators sharing how they use another online tool, like the one we talked about, Mixbook. There's another one called Storybird. Well, you can follow Storybird, and there are educators all over the world sharing how they're using this with their students, tips and tricks on how to maybe share the URL or to get the embed code. So we can ask other educators for support. Inside of Modo, another social learning network, it's not just for teachers to create a learning space for their students, it also offers us a professional learning community. And we can ask questions, ask, how do you solve this? Does anyone know how to share a video inside of Edmodo? Anything you're struggling with, the nice thing is there are other educators online who are willing to share of their time, talent, resources, and help us to solve these problems. So I'm here as a resource for you, and there's some really good online communities to support you as well. And there are great video resources for how to use the technology and support you in your learning, or to offer to your students so that they can watch the video and then problem solve and work in small teams to use the technology as well. We don't want the technology to become the barrier. We want it to be a way that helps us to express what we know and understand, helps us to connect with others and to learn from our peers and other experts, and to really differentiate our learning. So hopefully you have some new ideas here, and or it affirms things that you're doing that are really working well for your students. And I look forward to hearing from you about what's working well in your classrooms as you provide learning opportunities with technology. So thanks for joining me, and let me know if you have any questions or need some support.